Hi, this is Darlene from Digital Photo Mentor. I have some really exciting news and a sneak peek inside the brand new Luminar 4 by the folks over at Skylum. They have completely redone it from the ground up, and there's a lot of really exciting stuff that I can't wait to show you. The news that I want to share with you is I've been recently named as a Skylum ambassador. So as such, I've got a preview version or a beta test copy of Luminar 4. So let's take a look inside and see what it can do. Okay, so I've already got Luminar 4 opened. If you previously purchased Luminar 3, it looks pretty much the same. This is the library module, and I've got here a few thumbnails of some images that I've selected. So I've just chosen a few to give you an overview of some of the new things that it does. If you're brand new to Luminar, I'm going to show you some portraits and a couple of fancy things that it now does, because one of the big things they're promoting with the changes to Luminar 4 is that it has a lot of AI, or artificial intelligence. And at first, my first thought was, I don't think I'm going to like that, because a lot of things that are automatic tend to be overdone and don't do a really good job. But I have to admit, they've proven me wrong, because I've been really impressed with what I saw inside, in particular with the portrait sliders and even the sky replacement, which is something I never thought I would use, but I've already found a couple of applications for it, and I think it's going to be really good. Okay, so something new, again, if you've seen Luminar in previous iterations, Luminar 3 or even Luminar 2018, it's going to look a little bit different. There's no filters catalog anymore, and basically you just follow along these little buttons on the right hand side here, starting with light, which is the essentials, then creative ideas, and portrait and professional. So all the filters that used to be under those categories are now here, and literally you just start at the top under essentials, start with lighting, and that will give you your exposure and so on, all the basic edits that you want to do to your raw files. Then you start to get creative, and in this particular one, getting into the portrait enhancer. Okay, so like I said, it wasn't something that I expected to really like, but all I've really done here, there's no masking, there's nothing been brushed on. Keep in mind, normally to do this kind of editing, you have to go into Photoshop and do quite advanced layering and blurring and masking and all those kinds of things. I used to spend probably about 15 minutes even on a portrait in Lightroom to get this type of look. And with the sliders, you can do this in about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to show you a quick before and after. Okay, so this is what the image looked like out of camera. It's a little bit underexposed, so I punched up the exposure, but I've also added the portrait enhancements like the new skin enhancer. Let me just turn some of these off to show you what it's doing on these things. So the portrait enhancer can do things like whiten eyes, whiten the teeth, darken the lips, and things that I didn't think I was going to use, like enlarge eyes, but I'll show you where I've already used it. And the skin enhancer is sort of softening the skin, but it doesn't really go too far. I've tried pulling it all the way to the extreme, and it still didn't take it too far. So this is what the image looked like without the portrait AI stuff applied. Okay, so I'm going to turn it back on again. Okay, so you can see that it's softening the skin, but it's not going overboard. And you can dial the effect up and down to your own taste, and you can mask it if you want. Okay, I haven't done any masking on here, but you can mask it, which means that you can have it only apply to certain areas of the picture. Okay, with the portrait enhancer, okay, I've done a little bit of lightening the face. I added the eye whitening, the eye enhancer, which increases the contrast on the iris and brings out the color of the iris. Right? I've also done dark circles removal to about 30% and improve eyebrows, so it actually darkened her eyebrows. So it did a really nice job. I'll do the before and after again, and you can see that it's done a really nice job with just a few sliders. Okay, and I haven't had to do any complex masking or layering or anything like that. So if you struggle with portrait editing, but you've tried maybe other portrait automated softwares in the past, I know I've tried a few others and I haven't been really impressed, I think you're going to like this one. Let's take a look at another image. So this image, as you can see, this lovely fellow that I met in India, he has a lot of character on his face. Now I wanted the opposite for him. I didn't want the softening. I wanted to increase and enhance the texture in his beard and his eyebrows and his face. So I've done just that using some of the filters inside of Luminar, structure and detail, which is very similar to clarity in Lightroom or Photoshop if you're using that, but it gives you a lot more control. Okay, I've also done a custom vignette on this one, which actually is darkening the edges and blurring it. And I've used their cloning and they call it Erase, which is the healing tool inside of Luminar to delete some spots on the wall. So let's take a look at the before. So that's what it looked like out of the camera. So it's a pretty normal, looking raw file. It's a little bit flat, which raw files are. So just as a reference, raw files are not processed by the camera at all. And if you're shooting raw in JPEG, your JPEGs are always going to look better. So kind of a side note, because the camera has sharpened them, added contrast and saturation based on the picture style that you've set in your camera. Okay, so the raw file, which is what you're seeing here, has nothing applied to it. It's completely unsharpened on everything, okay? So even just doing basic adjustments, it's going to look better. But I've taken it a little bit farther and I've applied a color style, which kind of gives it like an old world, an old antique feeling, which is what I was going for with this fellow, because it fits the scene and it fits his look, okay? So that's something that you can do inside of Luminar. You don't have to use the portrait softening tools. You can get really creative. And this one was using what's called a LUT, or a look-up table. Okay? And that's something that comes built in with Luminar. You can choose any of the LUTs and apply it to your picture to give it a very particular look. Let's look at this lovely lady. Now this one, I did want to soften the skin. So again, I've used the skin enhancer and I've gone quite far with it. As you can see, I'm at up to 85%. Let's just zoom in on her skin here and you'll be able to see what it does. See how it's softened, but I've still got some texture and I haven't lost the integrity of her skin. Okay, and that's kind of what I really like about how it's working. Like I said, you can always dial it back. You can add these types of things on an adjustment layer if you're familiar with doing that inside of Luminar, so that you can change the opacity of the layer and dial it back that way. So there's several different ways of sort of scaling it back as to how far you put the slider, masking it, or on a separate layer. Okay, so I've done the skin effects quite high here and defect removal, and it does a really good job of removing things like blemishes. Okay, what it's looking for when it says defects are blemishes or dots on the skin. Sometimes if it's a birthmark or something, it may accidentally remove those. If you want those back, that's when you just want to add a mask. But you'll notice here that it did not remove her birthmark, so that was not an issue at all. Okay. All right, under the portrait enhancer, back to these sliders again. Okay, let me just zoom in a little bit on these so you can see what they look like. Okay, so basically there is a face light which finds the face and lightens it. Okay, red eye removal if you have a flash that you've gotten a red eye. If you're taking my portrait class, you'll never have a red eye, okay, because you'll know how to use your flash properly. Eye whitening, and it doesn't do too bad of a job. I tend to keep that subtle. Eye enhancer, again, it's increasing the contrast and saturation of the iris to bring out the colors of the eye. Dark circles under the eyes. Okay, I don't ever want to remove those completely, but lightening them is a good idea. Now in this case, this is the one where I said I would generally never use slim face or enlarge eyes. It's not something that I do. I tend to not want to change the shape of my person's face, of the model in my photo. But in this case, I wanted to apply it so that you could see what it's doing. And the enlarged eyes one, surprisingly enough, actually did a really nice job, because she was kind of looking down, and when I did the enlarged eyes, it looks like her eyes are actually opened more than in the original. So let's take a look at the before. Okay, so look at her face and look at the eyes after. Right? So it's opening her eyes and making them look like she's looking up and open. Okay, now it is slimming her face as well. Okay? And again, you get to decide if that's for you or for that particular subject or not. Okay, I generally wouldn't apply that very often, and I would definitely apply it very, very subtly. Okay. I didn't apply any teeth whitening here because she's not showing her teeth. right? But I did apply on a couple of other layers, again, the cloning and an extra mask. So I often do like a separate vignette layer to darken the edge. So you can see how it's darkened the edges and bring the attention right up to her face, where she's got the beautiful jewels and her eyes really stand out. So let's take a look at a before and after again this way. Okay, can you see the difference? Look at her eyes in those two before and after. Okay? See that? Again, that's all just sliders. Okay? So again, you don't have to be super expert at Photoshop to do any of these things. It makes it really, really simple. Okay, let's look at this bridal portrait. So this one, the camera file was actually a Canon and a RAW file, and the original, let's take a look, was really underexposed and kind of bluish, so it was shot really off color. So I've punched up the color and the contrast and done the skin smoothing using the tools that I just showed you. And we did a slight slimming of the face here, right? And I've also applied their high key filter, which is part of the creative or the portrait section here. Okay, they have one, where is it? Yes, high key, okay? So the high key filter sort of gives you this washed out look. High key means that everything is very light toned. Okay, and there's sliders to adjust how you can apply it in the contrast and shadows and so on. Okay, so play around with that one if you have an image that is mostly all light, like this one. The darkest thing in the image is her face, her skin, and her hair. So I used the high key one. Let's take a look at the before and after again. Right, I'll do it this way. Yeah, you can see how blue it is there. Okay, so I didn't set my white balance very well there. Okay, look at the difference. Okay, so it's basically, it's punching up the contrast. We've done the skin smoothing, and I did a little bit of cloning to remove a few extra blemishes that didn't get taken out with the automatic skin enhancer. Okay, but overall, Luminar did a pretty good job just automating those things, and I did whiten her eyes a little bit on this one using the eye whitener filter. Okay. This happy fellow is a winemaker in the Okanagan Valley. This was taken last year on one of my workshops there. I've actually just opened up registration for the workshop next year, so if you want to check that out, head over to the workshops page on the website. I'll put a link below the video for that. So he was a winemaker, and obviously we're in the vines. The sky was not so great here. So this is actually the first one that I tried the sky replacement on. Let's take a look at the before image so you can see what I've done overall. Right? So the sky was basically pure white, overcast, blah. Okay? And believe it or not, the automated AI sky replacement, you don't have to do any masking. You can use the sliders here to adjust how it blends with the landscape and so on. And it's done a pretty good job. I mean, if we zoom in and take a look at this up close, look at that. It's gone around the leaves and found the sky pretty well, I have to say. So let's take a look at what are the options. So when you're doing a sky replacement, you can choose from any of the sky images that are preloaded. There's going to be more available, and you can load your own sky image. So if you have images of your sky, and you can just pick one and see what looks the best, right? So that one kind of didn't fit for me. I'm just going to undo. I played with a bunch of them, and the one that I found that sort of fit with the scene the best was this one. So it looked a bit overcast, but a little bit of, just give me a little bit of texture and something that it wasn't just plain white in the sky. So again, it's done a pretty good job of finding those edges, okay? And I've applied an edge vignette so that I'm darkening the bottom down. I always do that, okay? But look at the sky, right? Look at that. I have not masked anything, okay? The only thing I did apply was the mask here, which is called luminosity, and Luminar does that for you automatically. It creates the mask for you, okay? So if you click on the luminosity, you get a mask here, and it applies it. I don't know if you can see that. It's pretty small. It applies it to only the areas that you want the sky to show up in, okay? and it does that again automatically. You can edit the mask if that's something that you want to do, if you have, you know, a little more experience with masking, but you can just let it do it automatically for you, and it did a really good job. Okay. All right, we are done with the portrait. So now I want to show you more of the sky replacement. So again, remember I was talking about how I didn't think I would ever use sky replacement. Not really a landscape photographer, but from time to time, I have some sky in my images. So I started playing around, and let's see what I came up with. So this one here from the Taj Mahal, it had a very sort of, when we were there, it was really sort of hazy and gray the day before, and the sky wasn't that great. We were there at sunrise, so let's take a look at the before. Okay, so it was basically really, really hazy. There was no direction of light. There was really not a lot of sort of interest. It's just kind of blah. Okay, if you've ever studied landscape photography or follow any landscape photographers, most of the most stunning images you'll see have clouds in the sky, right? To add some interest and texture and drama, okay? So I tried playing around with some of the sunset ones, and they actually came up pretty good here. I played with a couple of different ones. So again, that's the before and after. And I had to play around with the sliders a little bit and the masking on this one to get it to go around the columns because it had a hard time determining sort of what was the sky and what was the column, because there wasn't a lot of contrast, right? But I found one that worked pretty well, and I can also add something else in here. Okay, so that one works not bad too, okay? So I like that. And I also added the sun rays filter, okay? So the sun rays filter is one that is kind of, you love it or you hate it. And this one, I found it works pretty nice. Okay, so see how it's just adding a subtle little burst there? Okay. You don't even notice that it's there. We can change it. And you can change the placement of the sun and lots of adjustments. Okay, so I placed the sun where actually the light would be coming from. And now it sort of reflects into the pond here, and it makes it look more realistic as well. Okay, because when you're dealing with something like this with a reflection, the color is going to come through in the water as well. So just having that sun and the flare come through helps make it look a bit more realistic. Okay? And then the last one that I played with is another one of the Taj Mahal. So as I am making this video, my fellow tour leader and tour partner, Daniel Koznowski, is in India right now. He's in Delhi, he's not in Agra, but he's in India right now with a group leading our India Photo Tour 2019. And we'll have 2020 available shortly as well. So if you're interested in photo tours, head over to the Digital Photo Mentor website, digitalphotomentor.com, and go to the tours page. Okay? If you're enjoying this video, do please remember to like it, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel so that you get notice of more videos. I'm going to be doing more Luminar and more Skylum videos very soon. Okay, so here's another one from the Taj Mahal that I did the sky replacement on. Okay, so I'm going to go back here. I'm not doing sunrise on this one. Okay, and here's the before and after. So again, it's that very sort of hazy, nondescript sky. It's blue, but it just doesn't, it's not very interesting. Okay, so I played around and I found one in the presets that had this little cloud on top, and I thought, well, how perfect is that? You know, the light is coming up and it's just hitting that little sun on the cloud, and it adds that drama that I'm looking for in there, right? And draws your eye into the center and into the Taj Mahal. So let's just go back over here. So just to give you a few facts, if you are interested in looking at or considering Luminar 4, it is on pre-order right now. They are talking about shipping on November 18th. So if you have pre-ordered, that's the date that they've given for you to receive it. If you pre-order it now, I have some pricing. Pardon me while I'm looking at my other screen here. Okay, so Luminar pricing right now for the pre-order is $79 US. If you're in Canada, that's $104 Canadian, and you'll be charged in your own currency. if you purchase that right now, and that is a one-time purchase. So unlike Adobe, you do not have to pay monthly fees. This is not a subscription. You buy it, you own it. Okay, so if you never want to upgrade to Luminar 5 or future versions of it, you got 4, you're good to go. Never have to pay another cent. Okay. If you want to use it as a plugin, if you've previously used Luminar Flex or Luminar 3 as a plugin, you can do that with Luminar 4 as well. And what they're doing is they're consolidating all the versions of Luminar into Luminar 4. So it will now act as a standalone, as you've just seen me use, as a plugin for other software, or you can just open single images one at a time. I'm using the DAM, or the Digital Asset Management, so you can see your lot folders and your thumbnails and so on. But you can just open one at a time, like you would do in Photoshop or Photoshop Elements, and work on it, save it, and close it. Okay, so you have the 3 ways of working with Luminar 4. If you're wondering if it works as a plugin for your software, I'll put a list down below of the software that it works with, but the short version is basically if you have any version of Lightroom after Lightroom 4, so anything from Lightroom 4 all the way up to CC Classic, it will work as a plugin with all of those. If you have Photoshop CS4 or later or anything newer, it will work with all of those. And if you have Photoshop Elements, anything after Elements 10, it will also work with that as well. Okay, so if you want to get some of the benefit of these things that Elements doesn't do without going to full Photoshop, this may be a good choice for you. Okay, if you're on Mac and you use Photos app, or even if you're still back on Aperture, guess what? It works as a plugin for those as well. Okay, so there's lots of ways that you can incorporate Luminar into your workflow if you're already using something else to catalog and sort your images. Okay? I use Luminar primarily as a plugin with Lightroom, but this week I've been playing around with it for the last 2 days, and I have to say I'm getting addicted. I was up till like 1 o'clock last night playing with sky replacements, so I think I may have an addiction problem. And I was working directly in Luminar, not going back to Lightroom. Okay? So the advantage of working direct in Luminar is that you can save a Luminar file, and all of your edits and things that you've done become non-destructive. You can then open that file again at any time, or if you're working on the raw file, you have all your edits, just like you would if you were working on your raw file in any other program. Right? So I hope that's given you a really good overview of a Luminar 4. And I'm going to be doing more tutorials on how to use it once it's closer to the release date and you have access to open it and follow along yourself as well. And I may be doing some Facebook Lives just to kind of show you my workflow and what I'm doing with it in the next couple of weeks. So remember to come and join the Digital Photo Mentor Facebook group if you're not already a member. And I'd love to see your images that you're making with Luminar or whatever other program you're using. Take care, and we'll see you next time.